morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm grateful for the opportunity to get to talk with you about whole person health and coping with stress. We get a lot of information about coping with stress. Stress is ubiquitous in our society, in our lives, and there are a lot of people offering myriad ways to cope with stress. I think one of the things in our approach in this country is that we view stress as our adversary, as something to be managed, as something to be busted. You know, we get these stress buster suggestions, and it's all about stress management. And at the same time, we also look at stress as kind of a badge of honor. Like, everyone is stressed. Everyone has stress. And sometimes we're proud of how much stress we have and all the things that we're functioning and doing, even though we have so much stress. And so what we miss in that is the understanding of stress and the signals of stress as signs that we really need to take steps to rebalance. And so coping with stress, the way I talk about it, is looking at all aspects of health and understanding how you can restore balance and cope with stress in a sustainable, lasting way. So when we're thinking about stress, from a whole person perspective, we want to look at all aspects of health. And our approach contains two things. It is an understanding of the science behind the basic physiological responses to a stressor. And then we need to look at our specific stressors, what is unique to us, and the ways that we want to intervene and lower that stress. And that's going to be different for everyone. So we've got the basic organismic stress response that is the same for everyone. And then we've each got our individual perceptions of events as stressful. And those are the ways that we want to go in. And so when you understand that there's a basic response that is trying to help you out, that is the stress response, and that you have unique stressors, you will then have the knowledge to discern your own best path to relaxation and wellness. Okay, so what is stress? Stress, or a stressor, is anything that comes into our perception in any aspect of health that initiates a nervous system hormonal cascade that tells the body that something is out of balance. So an emotional stressor, an argument with someone, is the same as a physical stressor. A virus or bacteria or not getting enough sleep is the same as a nutritional stressor. Eating something you're allergic to or eating too much or too little is the same as an environmental stressor. Inclement weather, high wind, things that signal the body through the brain that something is not right. A social stressor, isolation, a spiritual stressor, a lack of sense of trust and faith in something larger than yourself. And we'll talk about all these factors of health as we move forward. But a stressor comes in. It is a perception. The brain takes in this perception, perceives it as something that's not usual, and it comes into the limbic system in the brain, the hypothalamus, then signals the pituitary gland. So now we're in hormones too, chemical messengers, hormones. Pituitary gland is the master gland, gets the signal that something's not right, and what we need to do is secrete adrenaline from the adrenal glands to respond to this stress. So the stress response is also called the freeze, flight, fight response, the fight or flight response, the survival response. And without this automatic response, we would not be here as a species. So it's very important. It's automatic. The automatic or autonomic nervous system is in charge of this response. So the brain, the hypothalamus, tells the pituitary to tell the adrenal glands to secrete adrenaline. Adrenaline is a chemical messenger. It's a hormone that gets us up and ready to cope with the situation, either by freezing, fleeing, fighting, one of those responses. And what it does chemically is suppress other hormones that aren't necessary in that activated state. So for example, it will suppress thyroid hormone, which is active in the immune response. It will suppress insulin, which is integral in digestion and balancing blood sugar. It will suppress reproductive hormones, such as testosterone, progesterone, and estrogen, because that's not needed in this fight or flight response. So what we need is adrenaline is telling, let's send all the blood to the big muscles, let's get ready to freeze or flee or fight, let's cope with this. We don't need digestion right now, we don't need immune function right now, we don't know if we're going to survive this event. I mean, the body is kind of thinking black and white here, right? We don't know if we're going to survive, so we certainly don't need those things. This is great. This is a wonderful system that keeps us alive, keeps us in balance. The problem comes when this system gets activated over time and we have a chronic imbalance in hormones and we have chronic suppression of immune function and digestive function and reproductive function. And we all know that there are difficulties with reproduction, immune function, and digestion associated with prolonged stress. That's how it works in a very basic sense. The hormones that we need to keep us running smoothly are suppressed, and they're dominated by adrenaline in the short term and cortisol in the long term to keep us up and ready. The other thing that happens when we're in this state is that we have more difficulty with planful thinking and judgment and reason, and we're more on the lookout for threat and fear. So this is what a stressor is. This is the stress activated state, and this is the state that we're coping with. I think it's really helpful to understand the science behind what's happening, because then we understand how we can intervene, and we can use those same systems to activate our rest and digest response. So rest and digest thinking and interventions will send hormonal and neurochemical messages to the rest of the body that there is no threat, everything is okay, let's get digestion back online, let's get immune function back online, and then our thinking becomes more clear and stress goes away and we are coping effectively. So coping with stress involves actively intervening in that response, getting the signal to the body and mind that everything is okay. And because it's an automatic nervous system hormonal response, we want to use our nervous system to shape our hormonal messages to get us back to rest and digest. And having these big human brains is wonderful for that. We can actually do that. We can intervene. So we want to capitalize on that. So that's the automatic process. Then each one of us needs to understand and grow awareness around what are the stressors that are interfering with my functioning, and have I addressed stressors from all areas of life? Many of us look at the emotional stressors, the arguments, the difficulty with thinking and difficulty with emotions and symptoms and relationships relating to emotions. And yes, those can be very stressful. Yet if we don't pay attention to the physical stressors, the nutritional stressors, the environmental and spiritual stressors, as well as the social stressors, we might be missing the boat, because we can do all of our work in the area that's most prominent for us, and the area that people are advertising all this stress busting, quick fixes. If we don't have the understanding of all the issues that are causing stress for us individually, and if we don't have an understanding of that basic physiological stress response, we're not as well equipped to create sustainable stress management or stress coping techniques. So we want to look at our individual predispositions for stress. This is based on genetic inheritance, it's based on life experience, it's based on current relationships, it's based on current situation financially, occupationally. It's really based on everything that we have going on in our lives. So we want to take a look at what's happening in the physical aspect of my life. Am I moving enough? Am I sleeping enough? Am I physically fit? Do I feel strong? We want to look at the aspects of health related to that Am I getting enough fresh whole foods? Do I have a vitamin deficiency? Do I have difficulty assimilating nutrients when I eat them? Am I eating too much, eating too little? The emotional aspect of health, of course, we know what's going on there. How are my relationships? How is my thinking? How are my emotions? Do I feel like I can regulate my emotions and relate to people in an effective way? Environmentally, we do have to consider, the big elephant in the room is this environmental pandemic. We also want to think about, do I feel safe in my living environment? Is it messy? Do I feel comfortable in the climate I live in? And then socially, we want to think about how are we doing in that regard. The body does not know the difference between one of these stressors and the fear that we may layer onto these stressors that prolong them. So for example, if I have an argument with someone and the argument is over, the emotional stressor is over, but I then layer a fear of future arguments or future threats onto that, I'm going to perpetuate the stress response, and it won't be resolved as quickly. So we want to address fears that we have adopted as a result of major or minor stressors in our lives as well. So we look at stressors in all aspects of our health. Everything that you identify as uniquely stressful to you that initiates that automatic stress response, everything you identify implies an intervention. And so this is going to be uniquely suited to you. It will address the whole person, and it will create more sustainable ways, more sustainable life habits that will make you more resilient and stress hardy over time. So physical interventions include things like sleep regulation, movement, dance, music. If you can combine all of these things, maybe with breath, singing, everything that we do to intervene or relax the nervous system sends a signal. It's inconsistent with the stress response. So physically, we think when we're stressed, we might get hunched shoulders, we might feel tense, we might feel closed off. We can intentionally go in and open up the body, understanding that this is what's happening in my body, and I have the power to move my breath from my chest to my abdomen, for example. I have the power to go for a walk. Body loves bilateral movement. It sends a signal that everything is okay. And so we engage in those things, and we understand scientifically, physiologically, what we're doing to manage the stress. We're not just taking someone's word for it, oh, this works. It's less sustainable when you don't understand what's happening. In the emotional aspect of health, we want to be sure that we are checking our thought patterns. Are we pessimistic? Do we want to try to move to optimistic? There are emotional and cognitive factors that are associated with higher functioning and relaxation, and they include trust, optimism, curiosity, open awareness. And so we can try to cultivate these things. If we find that we are feeling, we might be a little pessimistic, we might be a little viewing things as obligations rather than opportunities, or living in fear rather than trust, we can try to cultivate that. If you find out that you're not assimilating vitamins, you can work with a professional to get your vitamins in balance. You can have assessments with dietitians and naturopaths for hormones, for diet. If you find that there are things you can change about your environment, if you identify some stressors there, you can directly go to those areas and you can do that. In the spiritual aspect of health, if you find you're having difficulty trusting or having faith in something larger than yourself, whether it's God or Mother Nature or the divine or force, there are ways you can work to cultivate that, understanding that that is an important aspect of health that often gets overlooked. But we want to make sure that we're addressing all aspects of health and that we have good balance there. That's the way that we get the message to the nervous system thoroughly that everything's okay. And that's how we initiate that rest and digest response. So I've got a question I'm going to answer. How easy or difficult is it to train our system to intervene? The beautiful thing is when we understand our physiology and we understand what's happening, it's actually quite simple. often we have to start with baby steps. So what we're doing with our nervous system to intervene or resolve stress is activating a cranial nerve, the vagus nerve. It's a beautiful cranial nerve that runs from the brainstem all the way down the torso. And activating this nerve actually sends a signal. Remember, this response is nervous system, endocrine system, or hormonal response. So that nerve sends signals to the organs, to the endocrine glands to secrete to get the insulin and thyroid hormone and other hormones back online and gets us back into balance. So it can be a little counterintuitive to think about activating a nerve to calm down, but that's what we're doing. And so we can move our breath from our chest to our abdomen. That will activate the vagus nerve. We can relax and try to put our mind on the present moment, mindfulness or mindfulness meditation, which is a very simple way of just putting your attention to the present moment. And when you can do that, you are sending nervous system signals that everything's okay. Because when you're in the present moment, you are not focused on past regrets or future worries. And there's really no quality and no judgment to the present moment if you are just right there at that moment. And so every moment you can take in mindfulness will send a signal to the nervous system that everything is okay. So everything we do, the dancing, the rhythmic movement, prayer, connection, curiosity, altering your environment, looking at your diet, all of those things will send a signal. And so it actually becomes very easy to intervene once you identify the nature of the stressors that are particular to yourself. I have another question that I'm going to answer. What can we do to get better night's sleep? Stress will wake me up early. This is a huge question, and getting better sleep is one of those hinges that swings a big door in our functioning. If we can get our handle on sleep, we will do much better in many areas. A lack of sleep and too much sleep can be major stressors on the nervous system. They are perceived as stressful, and the body will initiate that adrenaline cortisol secretion, and we'll feel the stress symptoms. So to get a better night's sleep, we have basic sleep hygiene rules that the basic things that most of us are aware of. No television in the bedroom. Bedroom is only for sleep and sex. No work in the bedroom. Warm showers about half an hour before you'd like to go to sleep. Some people use essential oils. Going to sleep at the same time. Now there's a new program called Cognitive Behavioral Therapy for Insomnia, and one of the major premises of that program is you want to make sure you wake up at the same time. So there are formal sleep programs you can engage in. When you address the stress response, your hormones will become more regulated. So cortisol, let me see, in a nutshell, cortisol, one of the stress hormones, has a natural daily rhythm with melatonin. The body, when left to its own devices and not bombarded with caffeine or stress, will slowly build up melatonin during the day, and cortisol will slowly drop during the day, so that at night, in the evening, the melatonin hormone takes over and we fall asleep naturally. Over the course of the evening, melatonin will decrease and cortisol will increase, so that when morning comes, we naturally wake up. Cortisol is a steroid that's kind of an activator, and we wake up. So we've got this cortisol melatonin cycle. This is in a very simplistic way. And if we respect that cycle and we don't add caffeine after 3 o'clock, for example, and get that cortisol back up, because stress, including nutritional stresses like caffeine, nicotine, that's not nutritional, but chemicals that we put into our bodies, including food, can keep cortisol activated when it's supposed to be naturally falling over the course of the day. So you're still working with your nervous system to promote sleep. And everything that you do to send a signal that the body should activate the rest and digest response will directly and indirectly promote better sleep. Okay, another question. Little things are now stressors. It's hard to manage the uncertainty of what is happening around us. What's your favorite stress reliever? Okay, my favorite stress reliever is dancing and singing and playing music really loudly. Something with a good beat, something you can dance to. It brings me to the present moment so that I'm not stuck in the uncertainty or the worry. And if I'm singing, my vocal cords are vibrating, my body is moving, I'm getting good chemicals circulating around. I've got the body loves rhythm. I'm singing, I'm moving, my heart might feel full. I choose the music that makes me feel really good or helps me reminisce on good memories. That's my favorite stress reliever. There are stress relievers, in this time of extreme uncertainty and worry, it does help to focus on the emotional stress relievers. And the most important one we can do there is take a really good look at our perspective. What are we focusing on? Are we focusing on the news and the bad news and the fear-based information? Or do we want to make an intentional choice to focus on the beautiful stories of people coming out to support each other and the things that would not have been possible without this pandemic, such as finding creative ways to connect, getting back to nature, getting back to those things that we all know are important, pulling ourselves out of that rat race that our culture promotes as important, moving away from the independence that we so strongly promote in this country, more toward interdependence and connection. So I think one of the most important things we can do is in that cognitive emotional aspect, and it is looking at our perspective, especially with what's going on and with so much uncertainty related to it. Got another question. Okay. During the pandemic, I hear it's okay not to be productive because we are stressed. Can you speak to how stress impacts creativity? Absolutely. So creativity is a very important part of, I put it under the spiritual aspect of health. When we get stressed, it's a very slow, the creative pursuits tend to drop off because we're so focused on getting through the threat. We let that fall away. And sometimes we don't understand how important that is. So being creative is so important. And you mentioned productivity. Yes, it's okay not to be productive because it's hard to be productive when you're stressed because you're less likely to be thinking clearly. And then when you can't think clearly and you're trying to do your job and be productive and it's not working like you want it to because you've got this stress, then we tend to be hard on ourselves. And so I think it's very important to give ourselves a break and not expect to be productive at the level we were before. Creativity is something that we can intentionally engage. So picking up an instrument, whether you've played it before or not, picking up a habit or a hobby that you used to have, gardening, knitting, cooking, creating an outfit, creating a conversation, writing, painting, anything where you created, and we are very creative beings. We create all day long, every day. Just re-engaging that creativity, understanding that it is a wonderful way to intervene with this stress response and initiate the rest and digest response. All right. Any other questions? So I do encourage you to take this as a starting point and take a look at what is stressful for you given your experiences, given your daily habits, because I think in our country we perceive stress as something positive, or something that, you know, everybody's struggling with, and it's kind of a badge of honor to struggle with it. I want people to start viewing stress as an innate signal that something is out of balance, and rather than, you know, when you have work stress and everybody else seems to be getting so much done, we usually double down, have more coffee, stay at the office longer, and you know, get things done, and we have stress. When we do that, we're not honoring that stress signal. We're stuffing it down, we're ignoring it, and that can only make the stress response worse, because until we get to the root of it and we honor that response and pay attention to our nervous system and the stress signals, we will continue to be stressed. And it's important to address it from all 5 aspects of health, because if there's stress in one area that isn't addressed, it'll sneak up and it'll initiate that stress response. And so we want to make sure we pay attention to everything going on in our lives and develop stress coping strategies that are unique to us and honor that basic physiological system. All right. Okay. All right. So I'm going to wrap it up for today. Thank you so much for joining. And again, I'm Lynn Jonen. I'm the clinical director here at Sierra Tucson, and it's been a pleasure. Thank you.